Hey everybody, this is Deb with Truthification Chronicles, and I came across this letter by Chuck Grassley, and I wanted to share it with you. This is dated April 25th, and it is to AG Barr. So he says, Dear Attorney General Barr, during your April 10th, 2019 testimony before a Senate Appropriations Subcommittee, you stated that you are looking into the, quote, genesis and conduct of intelligence activities directed at the Trump campaign during 2016. You further stated that, quote, spying did occur, and that you believe it is your obligation to look into the question of whether surveillance activities by the Federal Bureau of Investigation or other intelligence agencies were adequately predicated. We share your concerns about these activities and are troubled by the apparent unauthorized disclosures of surveillance efforts and other classified information during the same time period. We bring to your attention information that may assist your review. First, in the course of our oversight work, we have reviewed certain text messages that may show potential attempts by the FBI to conduct surveillance of President-elect Trump's transition team. In text messages exchanged between former FBI Special Agent Peter Strzok and former FBI attorney Lisa Page, the two discussed the possibility of developing potential relationships at a November 2016 FBI briefing for presidential transition team staff. Specifically, it appears they discussed sending, quote, the CI guy, CI stands for counterintelligence, to assess an unnamed person's demeanor, but were concerned because it might be unusual for him to attend. A few weeks after the presidential election, Mr. Strzok and Ms. Page discussed the logistics for the briefing. Mr. Strzok and Ms. Page said the following, and here are their text messages. Strzok talking with Bill, and that's Bill Priestap. Do we want Joe? That's Joe, if you look down here, Joe Pientka. And I did a video on Joe Pientka, by the way. And so if you want to watch that, I'll put the link down below for you. To go with Evanina, and that is supposedly William R. Evanina, who's the director of the National Counterintelligence and Security Center. Instead of Charlie, and they don't know who Charlie is at this time, for a variety of reasons. Not sure. Would it be unusual to have show up again? Maybe another agent from the team. Or he's the, quote, CI guy. Same might make sense. He can assess if there are any news cues or different demeanor. If Katie's husband is there, he can see if there are people we can develop for potential relationships. Should I ask Andy about it, or Bill want to reach out for Andy? And Andy is Andy McCabe. And Strzok says, I told him I'm sure we could ask you to make the swap if we thought it was smart. It's not until Monday, so Bill can always discuss with him tomorrow. The nature of these communications and the precise purpose of any attempts to develop relationships with Trump or Pence transition team staff are not immediately clear. I think this, when it talks about Katie's husband, I think this possibly is the guy who ended up being on Mike Pence's staff. So I think maybe that's kind of a connection there. But I'm not 100% on that. I'm still digging on those things. Were these efforts done to gain better communication between the respective parties, or were the briefings used as intelligence gathering operations? Further, did any such surveillance activities continue beyond the inauguration? And in the event they did, were those activities subject to proper predication? Any improper FBI surveillance activities that were conducted before or after the 2016 election must be brought to light and properly addressed. Additionally, we note that a number of news outlets have reported sensitive information related to the investigation into alleged Russian collusion with the Trump campaign. Those reports have revealed sensitive information focusing on the FBI sending informants to meet with Trump advisors, a warrant to surveil Carter Page, and the United Kingdom's Signal Intelligence Agency briefing former CIA Director John Brennan on alleged communications between Trump's campaign and Russian officials, among other things. Notably, the Justice Department Inspector General's review of the Clinton investigation found, quote, profound concerns about the volume and extent of unauthorized media contacts by FBI personnel. It appears the same happened during the Russian investigation. Leaks to the media about ongoing investigations undermine the ability of investigators to properly investigate. Moreover, sensitive leaks to the media while members of Congress performing constitutionally mandated oversight are kept in the dark is unacceptable. Accordingly, please contact our staff to schedule a briefing and answer the following no later than May 9th, 2019. And then these are the questions that they want addressed. Please describe the nature and extent of your review of FBI surveillance of the Trump campaign, President-elect Trump's transition staff, Vice President-elect Pence's transition staff, President Trump's staff, and Vice President Pence's staff, including your efforts to determine whether that surveillance was adequately predicated. Number 2, how many counterintelligence briefings were provided to the Trump and Pence transition staffs prior to Inauguration Day? Please list the dates, all agencies involved, and each official that represented those agencies at the briefing. Number 3, many of the FBI employees involved in these activities are no longer employed by the federal government. How will your review obtain information needed from these individuals? Number 4, will you commit to providing the results of your review once completed? Number 5, what steps have you taken to investigate whether DOJ or FBI officials had unauthorized contacts with the media during the Russia investigation? We anticipate your written reply and most responsive documents will be unclassified. Now, I think it's kind of key that it's unclassified because I think it will allow them immediately to make it public so everybody can see it. Please send all unclassified material directly to each committee in keeping with the requirements of Executive Order 13-526. And I think this is the executive order that Obama made about how to handle classified documents. And that would require that you cannot redact things unless you have a really good reason for it. If any of the responsive documents do contain classified information, please segregate all unclassified material within the classified documents, provide all unclassified information directly to each committee, and provide a classified addendum to the Office of Senate Security. And so anyway, then you can contact them. And that is by Chuck Grassley and Ron Johnson, who is the chairman of the Senate Committee on Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs. And Chuck Grassley is the head right now of the Senate Finance Committee, but he was the head of the Senate Judicial Committee. So, there's been a little shake up there because now Lindsey Graham is in charge of it, but Chuck Grassley is still in charge of the Senate Finance Committee. So that's why he is asking for this particular information, although I think it fits in better with the Senate Judiciary, but I think he's also working with Graham on that. So Chuck Grassley is still in there fighting, but that's what he's got on this one. Now, I do think there's some interesting things about this. And I came across this article here, The Last Refuge, the Conservative Treehouse. And this is by Sundance. The Washington, D.C. Uniparty Flak, Chaff and Countermeasures Strategy. And I know this was done on March 21st, 2017, but I think this is still in play, possibly. And he refers to it in another article I'm going to show you. And so this is all about how they use measures and countermeasures. Politically speaking, the deployment of countermeasures is a tactic used by professional politicians in Washington, D.C. to counter incoming public inquiry and protect themselves from anger expressed by the electorate. Weaponized government takes action and creates victims. Beyond the strategy, the countermeasures are politicians assigned a role to control the incoming righteous inquiry from voters who find out about the weaponized or corrupt governmental action. And here's how he says it goes. First of all, the electorate become aware of a political issue or action, often illegal. And then the electorate become angry. And then DC needs to protect itself. Countermeasures are assigned and deployed to delay, obfuscate, and create the illusion of investigation of the illegal government action. And then the electorate watch that go on. The investigation goes nowhere. The countermeasure deployment is successful because it keeps everybody's mind off and it kind of pacifies the electorate. And repeat. And he suggests that these for investigations were part of that. I don't so much think so, okay? I kind of disagree with him on this part. But he says, the countermeasures are deployed to act as shiny distractions, keeping the larger electorate satisfied something is being done. Countermeasures are designed to create investigations that go nowhere. Well, not necessarily. I mean, yes, that's what the countermeasures are for, but I don't think these 4 investigations went nowhere. I think they did go somewhere, but we have to remember that Congress cannot prosecute. That's not part of their function. All they can do is recommend for prosecution. And this has now been done. Although Fast and Furious didn't produce anything yet, I think maybe in the long run there are going to be some things happening there. And then the IRS targeting, that has produced some things too. But a big part of all of this is that all they can do is say, we think this person did something wrong. That's pretty much all they can do. And the reason these 3 didn't go anywhere was not because of these 3 men. It was because of the DOJ they were working under. Because all 3 of these investigations occurred under Obama's administration. And it was not going to go anywhere, especially Fast and Furious, because the person in charge of the DOJ at the time was Holder. And Holder was part of the Fast and Furious operation. He wasn't going to narc on himself. He wasn't going to investigate himself. I mean, there was no way that they could get that investigated. As for the IRS targeting, same thing. You've got it under the Obama administration. And I believe that one was under Loretta Lynch. So the same thing was happening. It was never going to be investigated. It was never going to be prosecuted because it was under Loretta Lynch. And she was not going to do that because it was well known within the Obama administration that, hey, we don't turn on ourselves, and so there are no scandals, right? Well, there weren't any scandals because they wouldn't prosecute their own people. And Benghazi, same thing. It's not that these guys didn't do their job, and this is where I disagree with Sundance on this, because I think that while they were trying to do something, the Democrats knew it wasn't going to go anywhere. Just like right now, even if the House votes to impeach Trump, it's not going to go anywhere because it has to be done in the Senate. The actual proceedings have to be done in the Senate. And we have the Senate, the Republicans do. So it's not going to happen. There's no way Trump is going to be impeached. It's just simply not going to happen. And Trump's simply not going to be put through that. Now, again, the House can technically impeach, so they may impeach him, but the actual proceeding has to take place in the Senate. And you have to have 2/3 vote. It's just not going to happen. It really isn't. So anyway, and the Flynn intel leaks, this is still coming to light. Okay? This is still in the works. And it will end up being prosecuted. So to say that these 4 investigations were merely shiny distractions, keeping the larger electorate satisfied something is being done, I think that's unfair. And I think it's inaccurate because the reason they didn't go further than they did was simply because of who was in charge of the Department of Justice at the time. And, I've said it before. If you have a Department of Justice that's not clean, you see you've got a problem because the FBI is who investigates federal crimes. Then the DOJ prosecutes those federal crimes. And then you have to have good judges in there, honest judges, who will actually adjudicate things instead of trying to make up their own laws. And so when you have those in line and you've got an honest system where the FBI has investigated something, the DOJ has prosecuted, and the judges adjudicate it and rule that that is a crime, then that's fine. That's the way it's supposed to work. But it simply has not worked that way for the last, all of Obama's administration and long before that, to be honest. long before that. So this kind of thing, I can understand what he's saying here. You know, the goal is not resolution or justice. The goal is to deflect, create distraction, and eventually diminish the outrage over time. Keep kicking the can until it rusts and simply falls apart. Nothing to see here. Move along now, folks. I do understand what he's saying, because that seems to be the mentality of a lot of Congress, where they don't want to actually deal with issues, and instead they do keep kicking the can down the road. That's what's happened with all this immigration stuff. They never wanted to really just look at immigration and do the hard work of putting together something that would satisfy both sides and that would be good for the American people. Instead, they keep kicking the can down the road, and it never gets solved. And that, I think, is what frustrates Trump, because Trump's a businessman, and this is what he's used to doing. He goes into his business. If there's a problem, he tackles it. You know, there are different kinds of people. Some people, when they are faced with a problem, kind of stick their head in the sand, and some people just confront it head on. And Trump is one of those head-on people. And really, that's the kind of person you need as the president of the United States. Because if you keep ignoring the problems, they're going to get worse and worse and worse. And that's really what has happened for many years. But some of it was done purposely, because there were some people that were in power that were trying to undermine the entire United States. But I have a video on that one too, if you haven't seen that one. Anyway, so with this, you know, I don't think those particular investigations were part of this, but I do think that this is kind of a mentality that goes on. And he goes on to say, the political system in Washington, D.C. has become so massive, it is now capable of protecting itself. Any attempt to reduce the influence, scope, or size of the system is considered a risk. The system is, in essence, protecting itself. Deep state is self-aware. Political countermeasures are now deployed as human articles of self-preservation. And here he gives a demonstration, and he shows this. So let me show you this. Again, I don't think this was the situation, but I'll show it to you so you can see what it is.
That's what needs to be found out.
Congressman, before you go, I got to ask you about this investigation around the IT specialists, those three brothers that were fired because they accessed people's information unauthorized. They were making $165,000 a year, 3 times what an IT staffer makes. What's going on with that investigation?
You know, Maria, you just told me more about that investigation than I knew before I put the microphone on this morning. I am not familiar with that investigation. I can become familiar with it, but I'm not familiar with it, and I don't want to guess and dance.
So that was the Awan brothers, in case you haven't heard about that, and a lot of people haven't. I'm really surprised, is that they were these tech guys that were hired without background checks. Okay, there were a lot of people in the Obama administration that were hired without background checks, that they had a waiver on those. Now, these are IT specialists. That's people that are the techies that take care of your computers and your passwords and who are good at, like, hacking things, you know? They know about such things and can do that. And so, yeah, let's just turn over all of our secure data to these guys. They're in charge of it. Well, they were Pakistanis who were known to have terrorist ties. I mean, it's really bad. There's been a deal made with the Awans. I'm not sure what it is, but they kind of got off. They weren't really tried for that. What they were tried for was something else. And so I think something's going on there. Anyway, so that was what they used. I kind of disagree with Sundance on this. I understand what he's trying to say, you know, that he's trying to say that's how they protect themselves. But that's going to come into play because of this article. And Sundance wrote this April 26th. So, chaff and countermeasures. Now, if you don't know what chaff is, those of you who may not be farmers, you may not know this, but when you're harvesting like a grain or something, the chaff was, if in the olden days, a long, long time ago, they used to throw the grain heads up in the air and the wind would blow through it and it would blow away the chaff, which was the little particles and the little extra hulls and things that were light and airy. And then the grains that were heavier would fall down onto the ground. And that's what they would pick up then. So that's what a chaff is. It's kind of the extra wasted part, the part you don't want. And so yesterday, Senators Johnson and Grassley opened the door for DOJ and FBI to justify the post-election investigation of President Donald Trump based on a premise of a possible FBI counterintelligence operation ran against the office of the Vice President, Mike Pence. That is the article right there. That's the one that I just read, the letter. I believe that's the letter he's referring to right there. But I'm not sure that it does what he thinks it does. And he says, and lickety-split, the outraged voices jumped right to work, predictable. And he's talking about how it really is kind of a setup and everything. But he also mentions down here, this is exactly what those officials want to see happen as they tell their story of unprecedented heroic efforts to ensure all angles of possibility were covered. And so his claim is that letter is going to give the Democrats and the FBI agents and everything the opportunity to say, see, we had a suspicion, so we had to go for it. Well, there were a lot of things that should not have been going on, but he says here it plays right into the hands of the participating members of the fraud and scheme. These are discoveries they welcome. These are discoveries to be planted. This is where they want the focus. This is the chaff and countermeasures. What they don't want to discuss is the origination of Crossfire Hurricane in July 2016. What they don't want to discuss is Fusion GPS and the creation of the Steele dossier. What they don't want to discuss is how the fraudulent premise was established. What they don't want to discuss is the exploitation of the NSA database for political surveillance. That's what they don't want to discuss. And every time attention starts to head in that direction, they'll throw out another entirely justifiable headline-grabbing detail of their post-election activity. Now, again, I think this is true, but it's not true of what Grassley is doing. Okay? And still, it's not true of the guys that were doing the Benghazi, Fast and Furious, IRS scandal, and those investigations. Okay? I don't think it's true of them. I think they were genuinely trying to get to the truth. And we know now that Devin Nunes and Mark Meadows have gone to AG Barr and they've discussed with him criminal referrals. So yes, there are criminal referrals that have already been given to the Attorney General. Now, as for this stuff right here, I think he's right in the respect of the deep state and of the Democrats, who most of them are part of the deep state. Not all, but most of them are part of it. And this is how the deep state functions. What it does is when the heat starts coming on one particular area, they do something to throw you off and to get you distracted from that. Okay? So this is a method that's very well known for the deep state. This is how they work. So why is this coming out now? He does bring up some interesting questions about what Grassley said, because it's like, okay, if they had this information, why in the world didn't they put it out before? And so that's why he's saying this is how the DC game is played. Senators Johnson and Grassley laid the first shiny distraction on the table. And based on the responses, boy howdy, does the outrage game work well. Inquiry immediately follows the distraction. So he thinks that's a distraction. And again, he goes back to the Fast and Furious, IRS targeting, and Benghazi. And I told you those three right there. I just don't think it was a matter of using them as distractions. They weren't distractions. They were trying to get to the bottom of things. But because we had a dirty FBI leadership, dirty DOJ, and dirty judges, it wasn't going to go anywhere, ever. So that's why we had to wait until we got some honest people in there. And this is where he said he gets a little snarky here. Where's the Graham Grassley letter to Gina Haspel? And he says, Dear Director Haspel, hey, so CIA, how'd Crossfire Hurricane start? What did you get through the Counterintelligence Mission Center? Can you spare a few minutes to note the contacts from GCHQ and that meeting between Robert Hannigan and John Brennan? Huh, funny that. Where's the Burr-Warner letter to Paul Nakasone? Paul Nakasone is now in charge of the NSA and the Cyber Command. He took over Mike Rogers' responsibility when he retired. Dear General Nakasone, can you provide us a little more information about why the NSA dropped database about queries? Maybe outline the contractors that were of such concern they had to be restricted from access? Oh, and their current status? Too soon? 3 years. Now, here's again where I disagree with him. Just because of what I had in my previous video, that it took 2 years to get this lady convicted of selling secrets to the Chinese when she was working for the State Department. 2 years, okay? So to say, well, we haven't seen anything yet, again, I think you're not taking into consideration the magnitude of this. You really need to understand, Sundance, that this is huge. And there is so much corruption that it has to be dealt with in a specific way. Huber and Horowitz are working together. Horowitz is the IG, the Inspector General. He's doing the investigations. He has a staff of 470 people. They are working hard on digging all this stuff up and presenting those investigations to John Huber and his group. They are U.S. attorneys. They can impanel grand juries and get indictments and then prosecute. That's what they do. Well, there are a lot of sealed proceedings out there, and I don't know how many of them are actually indictments and how many aren't, but there are a significant number. They're going to be unsealed one of these days, but it's all got to wait until things happen. What still has to happen? Well, we need to get a little bit more information. Horowitz's report on Comey, and then there's Horowitz's report on the FISA abuse, and those might be kind of connected. I'm not sure on that. And then there has to be the declassification. And if you watched the interview with Trump on Hannity, I think it was Thursday night, then you know that he said, yes, he's going to declassify everything, because it's not just going to be the FISA warrant declassification. It's not just going to be a few text messages here and there. It's going to be a lot of stuff, things we don't even know about. He's going to declassify. And this is one reason why it has bothered me when the press is so adamant when Trump makes statements. They're so fast to jump on him and say, oh, that's not true, that's not true. You know what? He's seen all these things that are right now classified. He knows what's in them. And when the press thinks they know more, I don't think they do. I think they're being very arrogant if they think they know more than he does, because he's seen what's under all those black marks. He knows. And there's so much more that's going to be coming out. I don't know how much of it, but I do know that several of these people had one shared Gmail account. They all had the password too. And they thought they were going to avoid detection if they didn't actually send emails to each other. What they would do is they would write emails and then save them in the draft folder. And they thought that that was a way that they would not be discovered. They were wrong. Okay? And there were very big names in there, including one whose Secret Service name was Evergreen, and another one whose Secret Service name was Renegade. So look those up. You'll find out who they are. But most of you probably know who they are. Anyway, he goes on, and I'm going to put the link to this down below so you can see it. But I do think that he's got some interesting information. One of the things he mentions down here is that this Susan Rice memo, that was her memo to self, and they all thought it was a CYA memo. He says it wasn't really. This was not a CYA memo. It actually was something, and right here, if you take this link, you can see the letter in here, but this is actually a letter by Grassley and Lindsey Graham from the Judiciary Committee, Senate Judiciary. And they were talking about oversight, and they asked her questions about this when she wrote it. And basically she said, President Obama began the conversation by stressing his continued commitment to ensuring that every aspect of this issue is handled by the intelligence and law enforcement communities by the book. Yeah, I'm sure that's what he was saying. Well, they had some really good questions down here. They're questions for, did you send the email attached to this letter to yourself? Do you have any reason to dispute the timestamp? When did you first become aware of the FBI's investigation into allegations of collusion between Mr. Trump's associates and Russia? When did you become aware of any surveillance activities, including FISA applications undertaken by FBI in conducting that investigation? And then down here, I thought one of them was really very interesting. You wrote that President Obama stressed that he was not asking about initiating or instructing anything from a law enforcement perspective. Did President Obama ask about, initiate, or instruct anything from any other perspective relating to the FBI's investigation? Because see, if he asked for a counterintelligence perspective, then it wouldn't be the same as a law enforcement perspective. So he could actually have done that. Anyway, I will put this down below. I don't know what the response was that she gave to this, because this was back in 2018. So I don't know what, if any, response she gave to them. But I thought that was interesting, and he does mention it here. As stated, many have looked at this as a CYA memo, but that's not what this is. This is a justification memo written by an outgoing National Security Advisor, Susan Rice, to document why there have been multiple false and misleading statements given to the incoming President Trump and all of his officials. This is not a CYA memo. This is a justification memo for use after the Trump-Russia collusion conspiracy narrative collapsed, if the impeachment effort failed. The by-the-book aspect refers to President Obama and Susan Rice being told by CIA Director John Brennan, FBI Director James Comey, Director of National Intelligence James Clapper, and Deputy Attorney General Sally Yates that President Trump was the subject of an active counterintelligence investigation to determine if he was under the influence of the Russian government. Even the timing of the memo, written 15 minutes prior to the end of the Obama administration, is ex post facto useful as evidence of the author's intent. Put aside the nonsense aspect of the origination of the investigation for a moment. That part doesn't apply here. Accept their position as if it is substantive. We are talking about Brennan, Comey, Clapper, and Yates telling President Obama and NSA Susan Rice that President-elect Trump is under a counterintelligence investigation where the suspicion is that Donald J. Trump is an agent of a foreign power. Under that auspices, fraudulent though it may be, the incoming president is a counterintelligence investigation target, a potentially compromised Russian asset. Under this auspices, all of the officials would be permitted to lie and mislead their target, so long as they did so, quote, by the book. That's their justification for a lengthy series of lies and false statements. That's why FBI Director James Comey can lie to the president and tell him he's not the target of the ongoing Russia investigation. That's the justification for keeping the accusations inside the Steele dossier. Remember, the dossier is evidence from the president-elect. That's the justification for all of the officials to lie to President Trump and even mislead the media if needed. The Susan Rice email is just one big justification letter, setting the stage for all of the participants to have a plausible reason for lies to anyone and everyone. Now, this part, I think he really is hitting the nail on the head. That definitely sets it up so that they can say, well, it was part of this counterintelligence investigation, and that's just how we do things, because that's how they do them. It does justify what they were doing. And so, he goes on, he says, call out John Brennan for telling Harry Reid about the Steele dossier during his Gang of Eight briefing, but not telling Gang of Eight member Devin Nunes about it. Brennan escapes by saying Nunes was on the Trump transition team, and briefing a conflicted politician on the dossier would have compromised the FBI investigation. See how it works? Call out James Comey for lying to President-elect Trump during the January 6th Trump Tower meeting. Comey escapes by saying Trump was a target of the FBI investigation for a potential compromise as a Russian asset. Informing the target of the evidence against him would have compromised the investigation. See how that works? Every lie, every omission, every false and or misleading statement must first be filtered through the by-the-book prism of Trump being considered a Russian asset. This is the justification trap Democrats are waiting to exploit for maximum damage and diminishment of counterattack. The by-the-book justification, where every action could have been taken because Trump might have been an actual Russian operative, is the weapon under the camouflage tarp as the radical left lures in their political opposition. They shrug their shoulders and say in condescending voice, "Well, we didn't know. We had to be prudent," etc. Getting outraged about the Obama administration's lies, misstatements, and fabrications can backfire if you don't first think about it from their constructed frame of reference. The by-the-book framework is based on a false premise, but the action, just about any action, taken to mislead, even undermine the incoming administration is excusable under this carefully crafted justification memo. That's exactly why Susan Rice wrote it, and each of the participating members knows they can use it when needed. And that's going to be an interesting thing. Now, something I want to point out about this, though, is the D class is coming. And when the content from that shared Gmail account comes out, there's not going to be any way they can deny it. There was an assassination plot discussed. Okay, folks? So when that comes out, there's not going to be any way that they're going to be able to claim this. You know, it may look like that right now, but it's not going to happen in the long run. So you can go through, and here's things that he says, well, Trump can do this, Trump can do that, in order to keep this from, really exploding and going their way. Here are the things he can do to prove it. And basically it's D-class, D-class, D-class. So you can read through all these. Again, I'll leave the link down below. And, because it's like, release this, release this. Well, yeah, that's what he's going to do. All of these things are going to be released. And these people right here are not going to have that justification memo. Just not going to happen. It's not going to be there. And the justification will fail. So just in case, I know Sundance here doesn't think anybody's going to really be held responsible, I think. But I do. So these people going to be behind bars, will be indicted. Yep, I'm positive. So anyway, I'll leave the links down below. You can read through them. I kind of went over a couple of the articles really fast, but it's all there. You can look through it on your own. I don't know, maybe you agree with Sundance, but I think that it's not Grassley doing it right now. Grassley's not trying to cover anything up. He's actually trying to expose things. And I think really, even these guys, Issa, Chaffetz, Gowdy, and Nunes, were all trying to expose the corruption. It's just that these three had no chance at it. And this one is still in the works. It's going to happen. It's about there. He's already sent over his criminal referrals. It's going to be happening. These guys just didn't have a chance to do it because they were under a corrupt DOJ. It wouldn't have done them any good. Can you imagine if Issa would have said, oh yeah, hey, Eric Holder, will you investigate yourself? Because you know what? You were corrupt. I'm giving you a criminal referral. That wouldn't have gone very far. None of it would have. Like I said, I think all of these people are going to be eventually indicted. I don't know what order they're going to be indicted in. I don't know exactly when they are. But McCabe already had a criminal referral from the IG report on him. And I expect Comey will have one too. And it's just going to go all the way up the line. Yep, he definitely will. He definitely will. And they may try to use this memo here, but it's just not going to work. Not gonna work. So that's what I've got on this one. And hey, if you happen to be at the NRA convention in Indianapolis, stop by the booth that's R&Z Targets, because that's my brother's booth. And he has these really great steel targets and some other stuff there. And make sure you tell him hi from Deb. Both my brother Jim and my brother Tom are going to be there. So say hi to them, okay? And see what kind of stuff they've got. Want to thank you for stopping by. And I'll see y'all later.